Pest control is a great business, but employee retention continues to be one of the biggest challenges. Owners, customers, and teams all feel it. Welcome back to Pest Radio, the podcast where we talk with leaders shaping the future of the pest control and wildlife industries. From business and growth to marketing, mindset, human resources, and the real stories behind the people in this field. I'm Faye Cebioglu, founder of Dijital Karma. We help pest control and home service businesses grow faster by building systems that attract the right leads and convert them into customers. Our focus is simple: real growth, real numbers, and marketing you can actually trust. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation because it's one every pest control owner can relate to. Joining me are Marci LaRouche and Robin Chenail from SEAY HR Services, company that specializes in working with pest control businesses. They spend every day inside the real challenges owners deal with: hiring, retention, compliance, safety, and that constant tension between growing the business and keeping terms engaged and protected. What I love about their perspective is that it's practical. They're not talking theory, they are seeing patterns across the industry and helping companies build stronger, more compliant, more stable teams. Marcy, Robin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, I also want to take a moment to highlight something really special that NPMA is doing with the Women's Forum. I actually met Marcy for the first time at the NPMA's Women's Forum in Austin, Texas, which was my very first Women's Forum, and such a powerful experience with more than 350 women from across the US and beyond. It truly highlighted the strength, leadership, and generosity of the women in our industry. Marcy was one of the speakers, and her panel on personality profiles really stood out to me. It is such an important and often overlooked part of building strong teams, especially in service based businesses like pest control. Before we jump into the conversation, can you give a quick overview? CHR, who are you? What you do? How do you support pest control businesses?
Absolutely, yes. Uh, so CHR, we've actually been around for 60 years. So we are a very well-established HR business. We're based in Central Florida in the Orlando area, but we serve clients all over the country. We're in about 32 different states currently right now. And what we focus on is the business that needs HR, but either doesn't have an HR person currently on staff, or they have one, but they need, a little bit more guidance or leadership in the HR space. So for pest control companies, that can range from, starting up or a smaller firm that has maybe, 10 or 15 employees to, we work with some of our companies in the pest control space, get up to 200 to 300 employees. The larger ones have their own, fully established. So we do some project work for the larger ones, but that's really our sweet spot of where we give a lot of value. And we've been partnered with the National Pest Management Association now for over 10 years, and we actually are the team behind their complimentary HR hotline for members. So we are not only have engagements directly with pest control companies across the country, but we're also hearing from NPMA members every single day, asking the day-to-day questions that come up when running a pest control company when you've got employees. So yeah, so it's a great niche for us. We love this space, love going to the Women's Forum, Pest World, all the different events that NPMA puts together. And so, yeah, just really excited about the opportunity to share more today.
So can we say that you are positioning yourself like a fractional CMO mostly?
Yeah. So similar to that, right? So a lot of companies might have a fractional chief marketing officer. They might have a fractional CFO or controller. When you don't need that, full-time $150,000 to $200,000 hire, right? But you still have the challenges that come along with HR. So yes, exactly that. So you can hire us for a fraction of the costs and for a fraction of the time of a full-time employee. But we still are very much embedded in the organization. We typically attend leadership meetings. We're very strategic, and then we can also support on the day-to-day as well. So really, we can kind of play the gamut of both the tactical and the strategic, and help a company either establish HR for the first time in their business, grow it as they scale, or professionalize it as they're more of a legacy business there, but haven't really put the time and energy into the HR function. So all those things, what it really means is how that delivers for the client is it actually means as a client you have a better employee experience, you're reducing your risk, you're reducing your costs, right? And overall you're helping your company grow in a way that creates a great place to work, but also protects the business.
Okay. So pest control is a great business, but employee retention continues to be one of the biggest challenges. Owners, customers, and teams all feel it. So from your perspective, why has employee retention been such a struggle in pest control, even though it's a strong recession resistance industry? What do you hear most often from owners when it comes to hiring and keeping people?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we hear this every day from owners that, it's really tough out there. And, I think we've got a retention and a recruitment challenge when it comes to this industry. Unemployment in the United States right now is at 4.4%. That is still considered a healthy unemployment rate for the United States, but owners are feeling the squeeze. The big moves that we were having with folks changing jobs for a couple bucks more during the great reorganization that we had after COVID. That's no longer the case, right? So people are staying longer in certain places, but particularly in pest control, we're still seeing that a lot of turnover there. Right now, from a recruiting standpoint, the replacement of retiring workers, that generation, we'll talk more about generations, I'm sure, in this conversation, but they are not keeping up with the demand. We're not having enough new technicians come into the space. And so if folks are moving on to another organization or retiring, we don't have enough pipeline coming in. And then I think as business owners, it's really hard for us to continually focus on retaining folks, right? So we've got to create really strong onboarding experiences, create pathways for growth for organization or for individuals to stay at your company. The other thing that we see, unfortunately, is people aren't keeping up with market compensation. So we're not paying wages where we need to keep up not only with other pest control companies, but other service-based industries in the same market there. So, and I think, the biggest thing that we always hear about this when we go to the forum, when we go, we're talking with pest control owners is, there is a bit of a branding challenge when it comes to pest control. This is very challenging work. We are bending down. We're going under houses. We're lifting things. We're dealing with, chemicals and we're dealing with bugs, right? We're dealing with snakes. We're dealing with spiders, right? These are things that oftentimes people might not be as interested in. So we've got to find those folks that is an interesting work for, that they can see the meaning and how it is so helpful for us as a society to have the safety that comes along with pest control. So there's a number of different things that we are up against here, but it is doable. It is possible to create a really great retention program. It is great, possible to create really good recruiting programs within the pest control industry. You just got to give the time and energy that it takes to get there.
And what point does, turnover stop being a people problem and start being a systems or leadership problem?
It's a great question, Faye. What we see is when we start to, really dig in with a client that is experiencing a lot of turnover, people are leaving, and we're asking them, why did these last 6 people leave? And you start to see some patterns, right? And so it's really digging deep and actually having an honest conversation with the leadership team around what are the similarities of the reasons why people are leaving. And that can be things like workload overload, right? This is a booming industry. A lot of the people who are watching here today are seeing extraordinary growth within their organization. The sales tactics are getting better. AI is helping to, the work that you're doing in marketing, right? Like the companies are growing. There's not
Not
enough
only
people to do
marketing, all the new tools working with
exactly.
AI. Yeah.
Exactly, right? But the workforce isn't keeping up with that. So we don't have enough people to actually deliver the pest control services that we are selling. So that creates workload overload, right? So we've got that as a big piece. Another trend that we see when we start to look at, reasons why people are leaving is just poor communication, bad managers, leadership that is avoiding the hard conversations. They're avoiding accountability. They allow poor performers or jerks. I hate this. We always have a no jerk policy wherever I have a company, right? But they allow them to stay too long, and then the strong performers aren't supported. So they see that hey, you're letting this guy get away with everything. I'm doing my best over here, and no one's even acknowledging it. I'm going to go find something else, right? Conflict is being ignored. We've got inconsistent expectations. So, I think those things there can create just it doesn't necessarily mean it's a toxic work environment. I don't want to use that extreme, but it just can be just like kind of gnaw at you all this time, and you're being, asked to do extra work, but you're not getting acknowledged for it, and it's just a really tough environment. People can leave for that reason, right? So I think those are some of the trends that we see when we start to dig in with leaders as to why is it that your folks are leaving? Why do you have this talent, leakage that's, folks are leaving faster than they're coming into your organization?
Let's see. So, we are dealing with labor shortages and multiple generations in the workforce at the same time. How is that changing hiring in pest control? What are the differences, biggest differences you see between Gen Z, millennials, and baby boomers in the industry?
Absolutely. And I would echo everything that Marci has said so far, most definitely. The labor pool itself is really shrinking, and that's reshaping how we hire in pest control. We've got a much smaller Gen Z workforce coming in, and the baby boomers are retiring out. Labor force participation, that's projected to fall to about 60.4% by 2032. And so that means that every single hire, every retention decision, and really all of that matters more than ever. So for hands-on, field-based work, the pool is really tighter. Companies can't rely on the kind of post and pray job ads like they've done in the past. So you really have to actively be able to sell the careers, the stability, the purpose, training, long-term growth, not just the job. That doesn't work anymore. And speed really matters too. The candidates, they're getting multiple offers and they're getting them faster. And so we have to hire faster. We have to make sure our processes are really put in place, and those are essential. And we're also seeing companies, expand where they recruit. Your trade schools, military transition programs, your community colleges, career switchers. There are great industry-specific resources, such as the pest control, the jobs.com, careers.pestcontroljobs.com, and the NPMA Workforce Development Program website. And here's really the big shift, is that hiring now reflects a company's culture and their identity. So candidates are choosing employers based on culture, flexibility, growth opportunities, how employees are treated, and whether the company invests in training and safety. Pest control companies that highlight these strengths really stand out in a very crowded market.
What about Gen Z and work-life balance? Because I know Gen Z talks about a lot about work-life balance and how realistic in that in a service business like pest control.
Mm-hmm. Well, Gen Z is really the first generation to openly say, I want a career, but I'm not sacrificing my entire life for it. That's really the first generation to say that. And that mindset really matters in pest control because it's not a 9 to 5 job. Routes take longer, emergencies pop up, and the work is physical and it's unpredictable. So, what does balance look like for Gen Z in our industry? Well, they're looking for predictable schedules whenever possible. They don't want to constantly be on call. And they want a work culture where burnout's not ignored, where they can rest and recover after heavy days, and where leaders actually respect boundaries. So for owners, the key is really offering flexibility, not total freedom, but smart flexibility. So things like smarter scheduling, rotating who handles after-hour calls, giving tech some input into their routes, and allowing people to be able to swap shift when life happens, because it does. So when companies do this well, Gen Z does not see pest control as just a tough job. They see it as a stable, meaningful career that they can really grow into.
I'll add too that, I'm seeing more and more pest control companies working to offer a 4-day a week schedule. So 4 days of 10-hour work. And so I just think,
Know that.
thinking outside of the box as a pest control company, and really working with peers and, seeing what other organizations are doing. That's why I think going to a lot of these conferences is so beneficial, because you can hear these different things and seeing like, okay, now tell me how you actually did that, right? Like, how did you actually implement a 410? But I think that's, to Robin's point, is we have to be thinking about it as flexibility, but we still obviously have to run our business, right? But,
Mhm.
learning from our peers and other owners in the pest control space to see how they are accomplishing this, because it is doable, is just going to help with that retention component, particularly with this younger generation that is being very upfront about what they're looking to accomplish. And the good news is there are companies in our industry that are accomplishing that. So let's learn from them.
And we are also seeing more people starting their own businesses later in life in pest control industry. So how does that also affect the talent pool?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're seeing that is a very interesting trend right now. And more people in their 60s and beyond are launching pest control businesses as a second career or semi-retirement move. And, that adds new owners to the market, but it does not add new technicians. And so it doesn't solve the labor shortage issue. And in fact, it actually increases it sometimes with the competition for the experienced techs because the new companies also need dependable talent as well. The upside is that these older founders really bring a lot to the table. They've got strong customer service instincts. They have high self-discipline and business maturity, and they tend to run really lean, efficient operations. But when they do hire, they're competing for that same limited pool of skilled techs as everyone else. So their companies, though, often attract experienced baby boomers and Gen X techs who prefer a smaller, more personal, owner-based environment. And the real benefit is that these late career owners often become excellent mentors. They help young techs build diagnostic skills, effective communication techniques, and route discipline. Their presence raises professionalism across the market, and it really strengthens customer relationships with consistent long-term service.
Okay. It's also a great opportunity for other people, the pest control. I have some friends in finance because of the recurring business model. They want to invest a lot in pest control industry, not only a second career, but a lot of people see see it as a opportunity
Mhm.
for the recurring revenue.
Yes, it's definitely a space that there's a lot of attention from investors, and whether that be from private equity, venture, what a number of different models that are in this space. There, we see a lot of consolidation of smaller pest control companies, but we're also seeing a lot of entrepreneurship as well of folks that are, maybe came up in the space or learned from a mentor and decided that they want to start their own business. And so, yeah, it's an exciting space for,
Yes, exciting space for
yeah, all these
investment.
different
Yes.
models. Yeah, for sure.
I see also, in the industry, people coming from home service industry, but
Right.
different home service.
Mhm.
So they also invest in pest control. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. You see
So
the
it's a really
landscapers, the
exciting. Yeah.
HVAC, they see that opportunity and say,
HVAC,
well,
yes,
I'm already have this, pool of homeowners or business owners that I'm already supporting. What other services can I bring to the table? And is pest control an
exactly.
opportunity there?
So what challenge do you see between field technicians and in-house office teams? How can companies improve coordination between blue collar and white collar roles so they feel like one team?
I think that, it's certainly true that both groups are essential, but they're often dealing with completely different pressures. And that disconnect shows up in daily friction. Scheduling, that's usually the flashpoint. The techs feel their routes are really overloaded and unrealistic, while the office tech or the office staff feels that techs don't communicate early enough about delays, callbacks, or traffic that's happening. And both sides really walk away thinking their job is harder than the other person's is. The communication gaps, they really add to that frustration. The texts are moving fast. They tend to give short updates. The office needs detailed notes to handle those customer calls, their billing and compliance. So when those details aren't there, the customers get confused and somebody typically gets blamed for that. Another challenge is really customer promises. Office teams want to keep the customers happy, but sometimes they commit to time windows or services without knowing what the field is really facing that day. And then the techs feel set up to disappoint. Documentation is also another sticking point. The office teams, they rely on really complete notes and photos, and the techs see it as an extra step that just slows them down. But without it, the whole operation suffers. So, and underneath all of that, both sides, they really underestimate each other's stresses. The techs deal with the heat, cold, rain, traffic, equipment issues, unpredictable job lengths. And the office teams are juggling with phones, scheduling, complaints, constant interruptions, and then both groups really feel underappreciated. So most of these challenges come down to communication, shared expectations, and building a little empathy across the team, showing some grace. When you build that gap, everything from customer satisfaction to retention, it does get easier.
There's always going to be
So,
that, that tension, I think, between the, you know, In many industries, it's not just specific to pest control, right? Where you
Yeah.
feel it between the sales side, the customer service side, and the delivery side, right? And I think it's just in many ways in pest control, it can be exacerbated because you are not in the same space together, where you can create those bonds on a day-to-day perspective, right? Where you're not sitting next to
Yeah,
them and learning
that
their life and their family and what else is going on, right? Like it can feel like two separate companies at times. So it really takes some intention to help bridge that gap.
yeah, that would be my question also. What are small changes leaders can make to reduce that us, we as them mindset? I also had that, experience while I was working at, corporates, inside
Mm-hmm.
sales team.
Sure.
There's always,
Yep.
them and us.
Yep.
So what are the small changes they can adapt easily?
Well, to your point, one of the simplest things that they can do to really strengthen their teams is to genuinely show that they care. That starts with setting clear expectations, giving people the tools and support that they need to succeed. Don't just tell your team what to do, but really explain the why behind it. When people
Mhm.
understand that purpose behind a decision, then trust goes up, it's amplified, and assumptions go down. Invite input on small decisions. So, for example, technicians feel ownership in the work, and always close the loop when someone raises an issue. Because unfortunately, silence that really fuels a divide between the field and the office. You also spend time in the field. Nothing builds respect faster than seeing that work firsthand, and recognize the efforts often. Your technicians are really your ambassadors. They represent your brand in every home and every business that they walk into. Apply the rules consistently and avoid any sense of favoritism. Share customer reviews, route improvements, and safety milestones so that everyone sees the impact of their work. Use mentorship to shift the mindset from us versus them, to your point, Faye. Instead, move it to we're building this together. And finally, create real opportunities for learning and growth. When people see a future with your company, they stay, they engage, and they elevate the entire operation.
Can we also say, you just mentioned that technicians should also spend some time at the, no, office people should spend time in the field, but what about technicians? Maybe also, it would be good to spend a little bit time in the office at the beginning, to understand how things are working at the office, customer service.
Yeah, this goes back to thinking about like what, if we want to rebuild our onboarding program for
Mm-hmm.
new hires, is what does that first couple of months even look like? Doesn't have to be on day one, but how can we do a little bit of a rotational shadowing program to give perspective of what is it that they're managing and handling, and how did they decide what routes and things along that nature from in-house, right? So having the tech sit in for even a couple hours in one day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa, right? For new customer service or sales folks, administrative staff, that they are able to go out on a ride along, within that first 90 days of being employed by the company, especially if they haven't had industry specific experience, to see like how hard it
Mm-hmm.
is. Especially, I think about here in Orlando in August, right? Like it's uncomfortable to do this job, right? And the team sitting back in the air conditioned office, right? So like, how can you, bridge that gap? And that's one really great way that I love to see, and particularly in that onboarding program, having that built in. I think being intentional around that does help to eliminate some of that us versus them.
So let's talk about the first hiring circle. What mistakes do companies make early that create long-term problems? And how common is employee misclassification in pest control, and why is it such a risk?
Well, one of the biggest challenges in pest control is not just finding people, but it's avoiding hiring mistakes that drive turnover before a tech is really fully trained.
Hmm.
Hiring too fast just to fill a route. That's the first trap. So when screening gets skipped and red flags get ignored, as owners, you end up paying for it later in call outs, complaints, safety issues. Another mistake is overselling the job. If we're not honest about the heat, the crawl spaces, the ladders. Marcy talked earlier about the spiders and snakes and bugs. If we're not
Hmm.
honest about things and the demanding customers, new techs are going to burn out fast because the reality doesn't match what it is that they were told to begin with. Another issue is rushing the onboarding. When new techs get thrown into a truck before they're ready, they can often feel unsupported and they lose confidence early. And the role of the managers, that's critical. The very first supervisor that a tech interacts with, that shapes their entire experience. and it might shape it for the entire industry. If that manager isn't trained to lead and communicate well, then people won't stay. And finally, inconsistent communication in that first 90 days is one of the biggest predictors of early turnover. Silence makes new hires disengage. These are all preventable issues, and fixing them really strengthens your hiring pipeline, your culture, and ultimately your customer experience as well.
Yeah, I
So
think
what
the
is one?
biggest. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the rushing onboarding, and particularly when we are growing quickly and
Uh-huh.
and experiencing, like we talked about earlier, we're becoming better sales organizations, we're becoming a better marketing organization. We've got all these new routes. We've got to deliver to what we promised. So we've got to just, we'll just throw some warm bodies on it and that'll work. I think that's one of the things that, just gosh, that's what that's a big mistake. And as
Can we
hard as it
say
is to slow down, you got to do it.
so? Can we say it's one red flag for the owners? Rushing the
Yeah.
technician,
Yeah.
rushing the hiring process. So it's one of the, I think it's
Hmm.
the biggest red flag when hiring, right?
Yeah, it's a big one. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would say that slowing down, making sure that you have the right hires, even if it takes a little bit longer, and then making sure that you've got a intentional onboarding program. Now, you've got a small pest control company, a handful of routes, you've got 3 or 4 people or whatever. Yeah, you don't need to take 90 days and have every day be planned out, right? But like you still have to have clear milestones that you need to get through in an onboarding experience to make sure that you're setting everybody up for success on that.
Mhm.
What about compliance? Compliance is a huge topic right now, especially around I-9s, immigration and regulatory uh business. Where do you see the most exposure? And if a pest control operates in states like Iowa, New York, or Minnesota, what practical you know, steps should they already have in place?
One of the biggest compliance risks in pest control is inconsistent processes. To
Hmm.
many companies, too many of them are relying on their memory of systems and instead of actually using systems. And that's exactly where the Form I-9 problems start. Most I-9 issues, they're not complicated. They're simple errors. Missing sections, expired documents, late completion, or storing forms inconsistently or incorrectly. But when no one audits the files, those simple mistakes can add up, sometimes for years. A common assumption is that long-term employees, must have been verified correctly back then. However, in reality, many of those older forms are the ones with the biggest gaps. And because managers often handle I-9s without any training, those gaps just keep repeating over and over. Misclassification ties directly into immigration risk too. Independent contractors, they don't complete I-9s. So if someone is classified incorrectly, you're really exposed on both fronts. And in the small companies, without tracking systems, work authorization renewals are easy to miss. That's another preventable risk that can turn to major problems during an audit. The bottom line is really that I-9 compliance is not about paperwork. It's about having consistent, repeatable systems that protect your business.
If
And you were asking about, I'm sorry, please,
I'll
Marci.
just add in, Robin, too, that like the biggest thing that we see, Faye, is again, I think, most business owners or their administrators or whoever's handling the I-9s, like they have good intentions around it. They're trying to do the right thing, but it's a little
Hmm.
bit of a wonky piece of paper. Like it's a weird form. And so either the employee makes a mistake on it or the employer makes a mistake on it, all with good intentions. This individual is legally authorized to work in the United States, but you can still mess up an I-9. And so what we find when we do audits is that just having a document, the I-9 document completed is not enough. It actually has to be done in a detailed way and it has to be done correctly. And so even for those folks that say, I know all my employees are authorized to work in the United States, we have I-9s for all of them, we still find things in the I-9 audit typically that they could get fined for in the event that immigration enforcement does come to their business. So I do think it's important for us to take this time in this period to really look at it, make sure that not only you have the documents correct, but that, all of them have been filled out correctly, you've got the right versions, right? All those pieces there. And the other trap that can be fallen into is just completely throwing them away, redoing them. We can't do that, right? So there's actually, when there are issues with an I-9, there's very specific steps that employers have to take to remedy that issue. And so that's why it's just like, talk to an HR professional, talk to your employment attorney, talk to somebody who knows what they're doing around that, because when you even try and correct it, you might still mess it up, right? So it's just really important right now that we're really sensitive about completing it correctly. And then if we do need to make adjustments to it, that we're doing that also in the approved manner.
So how prepared are most companies in pest control industry really if they were audited tomorrow? And what is the cost of hoping it never comes up versus being proactive?
Well, realistically, only a small number of U.S. Pest control companies, they would be fully prepared for a regulatory I-9 audit tomorrow. Industry consultants estimate that well under 20% have clean files, trained managers, and consistent processes in place. So that's really a low number. Most companies, they rely on memory instead of systems, and that means errors, missing documents, and outdated practices become very common. And the gap to Marci's point earlier, the gap is not bad intent. It's that compliance hasn't kept pace with their growth, their hiring pressure, and the day-to-day operations for the organizations.
So we'll go in and we'll talk with like extraordinarily strong HR professionals, right? They have everything buttoned up, incredibly organized. They'll still miss things on the I-9, right? Like it's so, and then when you start to think about distributed teams where you have branches in different locations and they're each doing their own I-9s, or they think that the payroll company is taking care of it, or right? Like we come into all those different scenarios. So I agree 100% with Robin's sentiment that like it is an incredibly low number of pest control companies that are probably 100% clean on their I-9s. And it's not a reflection of the individual who's doing it. There's no blame game here. It's just a hard form to get right all the time.
So do you think that mostly when pest control companies hire payroll companies, they think it's clear now in their
There's some,
minds?
yeah, there's definitely like a number of whether it's payroll, PEOs, different HRIS systems, these technological systems. A lot of them have the
Uh-huh.
ability to do electronic I-9s. Well, that's great and all. So the employee can complete their portion, but the employer still has a step in there. And oftentimes we see them where they go and they just sign off on it and they haven't reviewed the documents as required. So there's some, there can be definitely some pitfalls where you think somebody else is handling this when it might not be the case. So you really want to make sure that that is really a cleaned up process.
Okay, I want to dive into employee, branding. So it's a very popular topic in the last 5 or 10 years. When we talk about, especially it started, aggressively in big corporates 10 years ago, maybe more. I'm not very much deep into HR, but my best friend is into HR, so I hear a lot from him. So when we talk about employer branding, what does it actually mean for a pest control company beyond social media posts and team photos? Culture gets talked about constantly, but in a pest control business, what does
Right.
culture really look like day to day?
Yeah, I will say, and this is your world too, right? But like, I would say that there is a big piece of employer branding that is the social media and the team photos, right? So I always kind of say, like, make sure that when you think about your social media schedule, like 5 to 10% is around employer branding. And that's
Mhm.
not to take away from what you're doing to customers. In fact, I find that the more you do that, the more customers, like, they want to work with people. They want to hire companies that have a
They want
good
to work
culture. Yeah.
real people.
Yes.
Everything is so technological now, but people wants to do business with
Yeah.
real people. So I beg my customers to bring me some team
Yes.
pictures
Yes.
with trucks.
Yes,
But
yes, exactly. Yeah, you want some authenticity around that, right? And
yes.
so, I think one of the things that we love to go through with an employer in the pest control industry is just really making sure that they have a clear employee value proposition. And it's this,
Hmm.
it's again, we're thinking, there's a lot of complementary things to tactics within, marketing to customers, right? It's like, how do we market this company? And so to start off with that, like, what value are we bringing to our employees, right? It's really
Hmm.
like clearly are taking our compensation, benefits, PTO, but also like career development, work-life balance or work-life integration? What's our culture look like? As you talked about, right? Support for our employees, like all of those things are core values. All of those things are really important that we have them, that we have them, one, that we can articulate them, right? And that we can talk to them, about those things to not only current employees, but also for future employees in the organization. And that can be through things like, having a really great careers website. Every company that I talk to, right? Like one of the first things I look at when we do an audit or a diagnostic about them is like, how are you presenting your company to future employees? Sometimes not so great, right? And so you don't need to have some big, spend $1 million on it type of thing, but just some really basic employee stories, employee photos, just really talking about your culture in how you're actually living it type of way, right? I think that's really important for us from an employer branding standpoint. And by the way, that doesn't hurt anything with your current employees because you're going to continue to reiterate to them why you are a great place to work and why they should stay working there, right? So there's a benefit both for recruiting as well as retention. But I also love to see, in addition to like websites and social media, but also getting out employee testimonials, right? Like having employees tell their story. They moved up in the business. You help them pay off their student loans. They've got another generation coming into the pest control industry because of their experience working there. Whatever that might be, right? Like let's gather those stories and let's share those stories. And now with how good iPhones are, you don't need to have a big, technical thing to record it anymore. Just like get it out there, get those stories out there so people can see those. I also am a big fan of best places to work lists. I know they're pay to play in most places, but local business journals or local newspapers, television stations, get in on those because again, that's going to help your consumer branding as well. But it also, people go and look at those lists when they're thinking about places to work, or if they see your job posting, they're going to go and do research on you, right? They've got the full, capabilities of research now. And they want to see, oh, you've been the best places to work for the last 10 years. That could set you apart from a competitor in a similar type of role in your space. So yeah, I think, and also just acknowledging your employees that you have, anniversaries, milestones, promotions, things like that. Put that out on social media, put that on your website, right? Like be able to share that publicly so that you're supporting folks. And, you know this better than me, Faye, right? But like if I put out one of my employees has an anniversary on Facebook on my company post, you don't think that employee is going to go out and repost that or share that with their friends and things like that? So now you've shared that out with your employees' networks, not just your own networks too. So it can have a really great effect both on employer branding, but also on the company branding as well when you're putting out these great stories to folks.
And also, everybody was talking about AI in 2025, and we did a lot of things with AI, all these photos, videos, but there is one thing people are missing. So authenticity is the key for everything. So even for, like you mentioned, it's easy to take a small video, with your iPhone, and it looks more authentic and it bounces much more than AI created video or a
100%.
photo.
100%. Yep. Make it real.
So also, how much does leadership behavior shape retention? And also, what are the candidates paying attention to that owners often completely overlook, apart from being authenticity?
I think the big thing right now is we've talked about it a little bit, but I would hone back in on this is a stronger and more structured onboarding program for the organizations in pest control. Reduce that first year turnover that Robin talked about, right? Like let's bring that number down. Let's focus on finding the right candidates, taking our time to find the right candidates, and then truly onboarding them and getting them the opportunity to be successful. So we've got to rethink our onboarding and our training process for new folks. And that's just not technicians. That's in, sales, administration, customer service, all the different roles here. And I think the other big thing here is holding employees and managers accountable to the standards of the organization, to the standards of the role. And I'd say the last thing I would add to that is training managers to be leaders, right? So often we take a really great individual contributor and we say, you just got promoted to be the manager of this team. And we give them no resources, no training, no development, and wonder why there are challenges. Wonder why they make silly HR decisions that then you call us and we have to work through, right? Like it's really, creating the opportunity, and that's in that career development space, is to really empower and provide real development for those folks to truly be leaders in your organization.
Leadership trainings, maybe.
Exactly. Yep. Leadership trainings, coaching, development, mentorship programs. There's a number of different things. There's some great things from NPMA to help to help you build that. There's outsourced providers that can come in, and even in our pest control space, there are specific training companies that are in that space. So there's a lot of resources for pest control companies so you don't have to completely reinvent this yourself. But you've got and you also don't need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on that type of program, but I do think there needs to be some focus on that. And that's because that's often where we see some challenges. You get great people in there, but if the managers aren't really leaders, it can cause some challenges.
I think NPMA is doing a great job on that trainings, not only technicians, but just you mentioned, I think
Yes.
there's executive leadership program.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've got a number of different really, really fantastic, and I think they're also doing a lot of great work. Robin mentioned some of their career development components, as well as the pest control jobs boards that they've created. Like, I love the energy that everybody's putting into this, because it has to be an industry-wide effort. It really does. And no one pest control company, even the giants that are in here in the United States, like, they're not going to do it on their own. Like, it does really need to be an industry-wide effort. And so seeing these different pest control companies band together to create these types of programs it's a fantastic thing to observe, and it just is going to raise all the rising tide, right? It's going to raise all the boats within the space, that we're going to find more great people to join our industry, and they're going to stay longer.
And one big issue we hear is, we also mentioned that limited career paths. How can companies create growth without overpromising? And what benefits actually matter today? Bonuses, referral programs, flexibility, maybe for Gen Z, work and personal life balance.
You're definitely hitting on these, Faye. One of the biggest competitive advantages in today's labor market is really the training and career path, just like Marci was talking about. The younger workers really want structured development, and they want certifications. Older workers, perhaps they want roles that respect their experience without burning them out. And when you design career paths with both of those things in mind, your company will really stand out. Companies are winning talent by laying out clear pathways, technicians to lead tech to manager and so on. But the key is really focusing on the skills and not the titles. Tie each level to, for example, certifications, or to safety performance, and definitely customer quality. Break growth into those small achievable steps: level 1, level 2, level 3, lead tech, manager, and so on. And when the progress starts to feel attainable, people will stay engaged, and make the pay progression transparent as well. Just as Marci was talking earlier, you show exactly what skills lead to those different raises. Growth, it's not vertical. Or offer horizontal opportunities like QA checks, training support, safety lead roles, or perhaps specialty services. Those really give team members ways to advance without necessarily needing a management title. And be honest with your team. Promise development, but not guaranteed promotions. Small companies, they can't create endless layers, but they can create real learning. And finally, in that space, celebrate the progress. Even this in a small org chart, so to speak. Recognition really helps employees to feel movement, momentum, and a future with the company. And you mentioned, Faye, too, about flexibility, but in terms of benefits, most definitely. What do technicians, for example, really value in today's market? Because that's really where the companies are winning or losing talent. And the very first one is flexibility. That matters more than ever. Techs want the predictable schedules, the ability to handle their family needs, and fewer last-minute route changes. And when their life works, their work actually gets better. Bonuses also need to feel real, clear criteria, consistent payouts, no mystery math. If people can't understand how they earn it, then they stop believing in it. Referral bonuses are another big win too. Keep them simple, keep them fast, reward employees quickly when they bring in good people. Another is affordable healthcare. That's huge. And not just a plan on paper, but something that employees can really actually use without massive deductibles. That's important to them. PTO, it's got to be usable. Time off that people can take off without guilt or disruption. That really goes a long way in retention. Training and certifications, that's another major motivator. Skill-based pay, that's and clear advancement steps, and really visible development. That shows employees that they've got a future with you as an organization. And if you can, even small retirement contributions, those matter. A modest match that signals long-term stability. And finally, safety investments. Those really speak volumes. Good PPE, safe trucks, quality equipment. They're not just tools, they're really benefits. And they show your team that you value their well-being. And these are things that make your company stand out in a very competitive labor market.
So before we wrap up, I want to zoom out for a moment and can you share how CHR typically works with pest control companies, what that relationship looks like, the range of companies you support, and what makes a company a really great fit to work with you?
Absolutely. So primarily how we support pest control companies or in other industries as well is through our fractional HR. And so that is going to be an opportunity for businesses to have access to folks like Robin, who has 35 years of HR experience, but for, very much the fraction of a cost it would be to have someone with that level of experience in your company full time. So, we have a variety of different models that we can do, and we customize our programs for each of our clients as to what they actually need, whether it's a little bit more tactical, a little more strategic, more compliance-based, more employee relations. We've got some that use us for all of that, right? And so we come up with that customized package from a fractional HR support perspective that really meets their needs and adds a lot of value to what they're doing as a company. As far as like our, ideal companies that we work with, typically they're going to have at least 15 or so employees. That's when you start to have enough issues with, things come up with employees that you need a little bit of extra help. And usually in our fractional HR support, it goes up into about 250 to 300 employees. And so you might have an HR person, you might have more of a HR manager level, and you want us to be, a fractional CHRO. I have the least amount of experience on my team with 20 years in HR. So we come with a lot of experience. And the other thing that's great about that is that you might have Robin as your person, but Robin then has access to our entire team. So if there's, the unlikely event that you bring something to Robin that she hasn't seen before, there's other people that we collaborate with within our team that then brings you a full team of HR people to support you through challenging situations. So we can also do project work as well. And so some folks come to us for their handbooks, for different reporting requirements, employee investigations, just, challenging employee situations. And then we do a little bit of executive recruiting, but that's only for HR roles. So if your pest control company was looking for their next HR leader, we could help them find that. We're doing that. We're engaging with a pest control company right now on that sort of a project. So but primarily folks use us for that fractional HR piece.
And for anyone listening who wants to learn more about CHR or connect with you both, where's the best place to do that?
Sure. A couple of things. One, I would go to our website, SEAYHR.com, and that's going to be a great place. We've got a lot of resources out there. We put out a lot of complimentary content because we just want people to do the right thing, and then they can call us if they want extra help on that. And then for those of us that are listening that are NPMA members, you can utilize your NPMA benefit, which is up to 1 hour of consultation per year on day-to-day HR tasks and activities that you want a second set of eyes on. So give us a call. Again, you can find our information there on the website. You can email us, give us a call, and then you can also get a hold of Robin and I through that directly. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. If you just search for Marci LaRouche, even if you spell it wrong, it still comes up. I'm the only one that's even close to that name on LinkedIn. So I'm putting out information as soon as it happens, topical things along that nature. Again, I'm just trying to help people to do the right thing in their business from an HR perspective. So happy to connect with folks that way as well.
So this has been such a valuable conversation, and I really appreciate both of you sharing your insights and real-world experience with us today. We covered a lot, from employee retention and compliance to culture, leadership, and what it really takes to build teams that stay and grow in the pest control industry. And Marci and Robin, thank you again for your time and for the work you are doing to support pest control business owners and their teams. So for everyone listening, we will make sure to include links to CHR so you can learn more and connect with them directly. And if you find this episode helpful, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and you don't miss future conversations with industry experts. So thank you.
Thank you, Faye.
Thank you so much.